Do not allow a sorceress to live. Where does that come from? What is a sorceress? Do you know what a sorceress is?
Oh, it's a witch, someone who's practicing magic. These magic things that should be God's domain, but the males that do it is fine.
Yes, a sorceress, not a sorcerer. You're a witch, Harry. All right, get the hell out of here before I kill you. We just got through with our episode about the 10 Commandments of Exodus 20, and we're ready to get going with the laws. So if 10 Commandments weren't enough, buddy, we got a whole lot more for you. So we'll just pick right up with Exodus 21. God said to Moses, "These are the laws that you are to set before them being the Israelites. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone."
Does that?
What you got?
Is that irrespective of how much it costs to buy the slave in the first place? If you buy a slave for 1 talent, does he go away in 6 years? But if you buy another one for 50 talents, that's also,
I think so, because there are further rules later about how to redeem slaves that have not served their entire 6 years or what have you. Or if you're a woman, you can't do that. There's no time limit. So if he comes alone, he's free to go alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, "I love my master and my wife and children and do not want to go free," then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life.
Yeah, the NRSV and a couple others say bring him to God and not the judges, which is also very interesting. But that whole section kind of seems to me that God would be perfectly fine with you breeding slaves,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you would indenture all of them
forever.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, what the hell, dude? And the only way to get out of slavery is such an interesting dichotomy. Like, well, do you love your wife and want her to go with you? Well, yes, I do. Well, then you have to tell me you love me if you ever want to see her again. Oh, okay, if I tell you I love you, then I can leave with my wife. Nope, you never get to leave. It's like, well, so I never get my wife. Well, that's correct. You can never be free with your wife and child. Like, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So, but I'll tell you what, here's the thing. Also, not only can you never leave, you're my servant for life, and I'm going to freaking jam this all through your ear up against the door frame. I'm assuming that's what's happening. They're putting their up against the door frame and like hammering an awl through their ear.
Yeah. Well, this goes back. We talked about the patriarchs making everybody take out all their rings, and I'm wondering if the earring was a signifier of being a slave, and so that's what you're doing. You're permanently altering them, putting a ring in, and it demonstrates their servitude.
If I recall, Isaac gave Rachel an earring to say, "You're mine," right?
Yeah.
Or was it Jacob and Rebecca? Dude, I don't unfortunately can't remember. But anyway, it was one of those. He was like, "Here, put this earring on." Oh no, I think it was Eliezer gave it to Rebecca and said, "This is to show that you're willing to come back with me." Anyway, if she does not please the man, if a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. If she does not please the master who he has selected for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If the son marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with any of these things, she's to go free.
So this is one thing I thought was interesting, was reading the different versions. JPS and the NAB have conjugal rights. The NRSB, the ESV, NIV have marital rights. Friedman's translation, that one with all the documentary things, says hygiene.
What does that mean?
I don't know. He doesn't put any notes in. He'll note sometimes where it says different things, but that one, he didn't have anything, as far as I know. Let me double check here.
And oddly, in chapter 21, the notes in the NIV Study Bible are literally quiet, crickets when it comes to this. What does that mean? So what I had to do is I went to Foreman. Foreman has a Parshat companion for this. And in it, what he talks about is we're talking about, you're essentially selling. The example he gives is selling your daughter for $5,000 or 5,000 shekels.
Yeah.
You sell your daughter to this family. The family, with the understanding that this family is going to marry you and you'll become like a daughter to them. That's the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So say that for whatever reason over the course of the next 6 years, they don't do that. Well, to redeem her, you have to pay back the retroactive amount that you owe on that $5,000, say. But she's still considered your servant. If she has so little, if she is so low in stature to you that you don't want to marry her yourself or provide her for one of your sons, then she's probably being mistreated, and you have every right to do that. You own her services, right? And so you essentially have another situation where you can just buy the service of a person and use them up and send them back to their parents with whatever zero if you've used them up the entire time. If you're like, I don't want to marry her, or I don't want her to be a dog.
I mean, yes and no, but it says that you can't diminish her food or clothing or her hygiene, marital rights, conjugal rights.
Gross.
I mean, like, so it says if you don't do these things for her, she has to go free without the payment for having been redeemed or whatever. But if you decide that you don't want her as your wife, you're just going to keep her as a concubine, it sounds like she can come in, you're with your real wife, and she can be like, no, I want it now.
Yeah.
So gross.
Oh, man. Okay, so now regarding personal injuries. Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. This is mirroring Genesis 9:6, where it says, whoever sheds human blood shall have their blood be shed. Okay, so there's the first instance of it's okay to kill. And I went down, I made just in the next 4 chapters a list of times when it's okay to kill. And so we'll keep track. That's number 1. So if you deliberately kill someone.
But you're not supposed to murder. Is that not considered murder, even though you're intentionally killing somebody?
So I listened to a conservative podcast, conservative sermon podcast, and they talk about how justice is considered okay. Like if you kill out of self-preservation, familial preservation, or justice, then it's okay. So, and justice is considered anything that God deems, necessary to maintain, social order.
Right.
So, and this is one of those things. So anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if you didn't mean to do it, but God goes ahead and lets it happen, they are to flee to a place I will designate. Now, when it says I, are we talking about God or the judges?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because God, in the same verse, if it's not done intentionally, but God lets it happen, they are to flee to a place that I will designate. So it's 2 different conjugates that same, or 2 different nouns in the same verse.
I wonder what the original says, someone that understands ancient Hebrew or whatever. I did want to mention, I forgot, the NIV Study Bible has a note that says that this law code is unique among ancient Near Eastern law codes because it begins with slavery, and obviously it draws a correlation between them coming out of slavery in Egypt or whatever. But it didn't start with slavery. It started with the 10 Commandments, right?
What's that?
The law code.
Oh, yeah. I'm assuming it started with the 10 Commandments. Yeah.
Anyway, that was just a thing.
Sorry, I was off double checking what Rashi had to say about this God versus I thing. Okay. So, and all he says is that when it says I will make a place for you, it says even in the desert where he, the man who has murdered, shall flee, and what place affords him asylum? This is the camp of the Levites. So it sounds like it's the judges who make the determination for where that person should flee.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, and that means that this is written from the perspective of the judges, Moses, Aaron, or some other Levite priest.
Yeah, and now this is a consequence for breaking the do not kill commandment. So is this the first time that we've had something like that?
A consequence?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it is. It's pretty obvious we're just talking about it. So, I mean,
I see. Oh, a consequence for breaking a commandment, not just breaking something that God, because like God has stricken people for not obeying Him before. It's just it was all kind of like willy nilly. Nothing's been committed to paper yet, so who's to say?
Right. But now He's saying, it's not that God's going to kill these people, like we talked about with Rabbi about the execution for not participating properly in the Passover, whatever. Now it's saying you're going to take him and kill him to the designated place away from my altar.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Okay, yeah, I think you're right. So now it's man carrying out that justice. If anyone, so verse 14, if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. If anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death.
Other versions say curse as well, not just
right, curse.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this isn't like chasing after your mom or dad with a knife. This is disobeying them. This is the breaking of that commandment. So
so there's a couple of different versions of it. One says strikes them and then curses them and all this stuff. But I think a curse in this instance would be specifically saying, go to hell or something like that. Not swearing at them, not, being disrespectful or whatever. It's an actual an actual curse.
Okay. Let's see. Rashi says that you're not liable for this to have this be put upon you unless you strike a blow that causes a wound, and that the death penalty, is to be carried out by strangulation. So I was curious about these different death penalties because a lot of them say stoned, some of them say whipped, not whipped, but like they typically incur the use of some sort of an implement and aren't done by your hand. But later God says, I will strike you down by my sword. And I was like, that's the first time we have like the use of like a violent weapon for this.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. Anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. So there you go. You have attacking and you have cursing. Interesting that they're separated like that. Again, you'd have to assume that these are in order of importance, I guess. I don't know. Why would you separate them if there weren't?
Yeah.
So verse 18, if people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fist and the victim does not die but is confined to the bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around with a staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured party for any loss of time and see that the victim is completely healed. That's something right there.
Yeah, I think so arranging for a full recovery or thoroughly healed or whatever, I think means basically you're going to have to pay for the doctor or whatever. But although there's another law coming up that kind of contradicts this a little bit, but that it makes sense. You hurt somebody, you're going to pay for the time that they're not able to work.
Yeah. But the loophole here is that you can quarrel with someone and beat them to the point that they have to use a cane to get around. And God's like, all right, it's the second day and he can walk with a cane, Yeah.
Anyone just got to pay for the cell. Yeah.
Yeah. Rub it on yourself. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. What does that mean? Punished how? Death is a distinct punishment. What is punished?
Yeah. I mean, so we get into the eye for an eye stuff at some point, right? I think that applies. So that would be a punishment that's not death.
Yeah. But then Rashi says that punishment in this case is death by decapitation by the sword. So, okay, Rashi, sure. And then, and so again, if they're not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property.
That is in the fine print. Death by the sword.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then, so again, you're essentially the loophole is that beat your slaves, and you won't incur punishment so long as they're good to go after a couple days.
Yeah, but I thought
throw them in an ice bath.
But I thought you weren't supposed to treat people bad because you were slaves. You know slaves. How? Yeah, you know what it was like. But yet, you can go ahead and you can beat them. It's fine.
You can beat them so long as they're good in a couple days. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there's no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you're to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, bruise for bruise. So the NIV says that includes the woman and the child. So I don't know how you're supposed to figure out what damage the baby incurred, but I mean, if you strike a pregnant woman and she miscarries, then the idea here is that you have to die. Or if the husband says, "Yeah, I want you to die," right? But also, I can't remember if it's here or later where they talk about how it's up to the husband, or no, it's up to the family of someone who's killed to decide whether they want the offender to be put to death or if they just want some money. Like, I'd rather just have this life insurance policy pay out. But you got to choose. Either we're going to kill this guy or they're going to pay you. And so, again, a loophole there is that.
Well, but that sounds like justice might be different for, if someone's so poor that they need this money to get by because they lost their source of income. I thought you weren't supposed to. You're supposed to treat the poor and the rich the same. In this case, it's definitely not. It's definitely weighted one way.
And then also it kind of like says that the more money you have, the more likely it is that you can get away with murder. You can literally get away with murder. Like, especially if you're going around killing homeless people, like just kill them. And like, what are they going to choose? To kill you over like getting a nice little payout? Like,
and this is also kind of an abortion loophole. You can gin up a fight for the purposes of accidentally falling over and pushing this woman down the stairs, And
then the husband's like, that's fine, actually. She didn't ask me if I wanted to keep it.
If that's my kid and I'm not her husband,
Oh, interesting. Except that the baby dies.
Well, right.
You have to die.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, maybe if the husband deems it so. So an owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys that eye must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. Those the exact same verses. Why are those like that?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
Why do we get eye? I mean, we get a lot of eye for an eye, tooth for tooth imagery later, but is that based on this, or is that a retro? Is that like what's the word? Like a retrography? Where they come back and make it work.
Yeah. And why is that not up there with the other slave provisions? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. If a bull gores a man or woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. Mm-hmm. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring, and the owner has been warned but has not kept it pinned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned, and the owner is to be put to death. However, if a payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his own life by payment of whatever is damaged. Payment of whatever is demanded. So again, your bull has killed someone for the second time, at least. And the widow or whomever can say, look, that was how I made my money. I need you to pay for it. So like, what do? Are you allowed to look at their finances and be like, how much can you afford? Because that's going to be the price.
Yeah. Well, but also talk about another loophole. Like, it's not exactly a loophole. It's more of a contradiction kind of thing. So you've got an ox and it gores somebody. It's going to be killed. But now you've been warned, don't do it again. If this dead ox goes and kills more people, then the rules are different.
Oh, wait, what? That can't be right. Okay, if it gores a man or woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death. If, however, the bull has had a habit of goring, it has had a habit of goring, but maybe
and you've been warned.
And you've been warned. So yeah, the first time.
Well, okay, so I guess maybe it doesn't have to be gored to death.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah. All right.
I guess you could secret it away. Like every time you have a card that you put stamps on, you have to get holes punched in it. And like, how many? Let me see that bull's card. Like, no, I don't want to show you my bull's card. Okay. However, if a payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by payment of whatever is demanded. The law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. So lucky them that they get they get special provision in this. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. So the slave gets jack all, just gets a gore hole, and the owner has to pay 30 shekels. So
if it gores a man or woman to death, it's going to be put to death, right? Mm-hmm. If it gores a boy or a girl or a male or female slave, then it's going to be killed, even if they don't.
Yes.
So that's right. It can gore a free person, a free man. It can gore him and not kill him, and it'll be fine. But if it gores and not kills a slave or someone's son or daughter, then it's going to be killed. That seems strange.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't say anything about kill. However, okay. If the law also applies if a bull gores a son or daughter, it doesn't say to death. So yeah, it doesn't say to death. So yeah, you're right. That's interesting. What the heck?
Yeah, that's weird.
And also, isn't 30 shekels the amount of money that Judas accepted for his betrayal?
Biblical number.
Jesus? It's a biblical number. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 30. 30 pieces of silver.
I wonder how they tied that in. If anyone uncovers a pig, or I'm sorry, if anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. So now you got a big old ox in your pit. How in the hell are you going to get it out of there? And then in the meantime, you got to pay the owner for the loss of their animal. What's cool is it doesn't say that you can't eat it. Earlier, if the bull gores someone, you can't eat it. You just got to waste the meat.
Well,
and so now,
but also, it doesn't necessarily have to die. It's just got to fall in the pit.
Oh, that's true. And you got to get it out of there without breaking its legs or whatever. I've just covered it with earth and, cook it like like the Bedouins. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. So again, I guess we're chopping it up, probably splitting it down the middle, from the head to the tail. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange. What does that mean?
So
the owner must pay animal for animal.
Yeah, you're basically my animal killed your animal, so I'm paying for paying you for your animal, but I get to keep it.
Oh, you're not paying me an animal, you're paying me for my animal? I thought it was saying that you have to pay animal for animal, like you have to give me an ox or a sheep.
I guess it could be interpreted that you give them your animal and take theirs.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and take the dead animal in exchange.
Yeah.
Why do you get meat? Like this is still important. This is still why do I have this commodity, this livestock good? If it's not to...
Well, aren't they still in the wilderness and supposedly have no meat? They took their flocks and then the flocks are gone, but they're getting the manna and the quail. So like
I keep forgetting that they don't have meat.
They've got to, I guess, be outlining these rules for the future, but it's just.
Well, based on the timeline that I looked at, we're not going to leave Mount Sinai. We're not going to leave this part of this area until the end of Leviticus. This is what happened, or maybe, it's not until they're delivered to Canaan, like in Deuteronomy, that we figure that we leave this area. They're here for 10 months, is what I read. So, so like they're gonna have to remember all this stuff. So that's the end of chapter 21. So just really quick, we're talking about Hebrew servants. And then we're talking about personal injuries. So under the personal injury header, we have what happens if your ox falls into a hole.
Yeah.
So, all right, on to chapter 22, the protection of property. Let me make sure I'm on 22 elsewhere and all my other various and sundry notes. Me, Rashi, you long one. Okay, so chapter 22. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it, or sells it, must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. So that is a massive overpay just for stealing. So now we're kind of learning here the importance, or I should say, how I don't know how unappealing stealing should be to you, right? Because like you're gonna have to really pay for that stuff that you stole. And if you needed an ox or a sheep so bad that you stole it, are you gonna have 5 or 4 of the others? What happens if you don't? It's not in here. We don't know.
Yeah.
If you can't pay it, you get to nothing. Verse 2, if a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, this is great. The defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed.
Yeah.
So break into my house. I just hope to God that you do it before sunrise, because otherwise I'm guilty of bloodshed, which means I have to be put to death.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyone who steals must certainly make restitution. But if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double.
So if you steal somebody's ox or sheep, you're paying 5 to 1. Okay. Unless that is still alive, if you're just leading it out instead of killing it first, then you got to pay 10 to 1.
Is that what it says?
The sheep thieves shall pay double.
Oh, double. Oh, okay. I didn't think about the double, like your double. It's a multiplier. It's multiplicative of the original payment. I thought it was just double, like 2 dogs.
No. 10 to 1.
Nice. Hell yeah. Take that. Better kill that sun gun. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard. Again, what if you don't have any?
Well, also, aren't you supposed to take the best of it and give it to God?
Oh God, you just messed up. You done messed up, boy. I think the best goes to God, and then the best of the rest goes to the person that you.
Yeah. I would assume that's the way you'd have to make it work. Yeah.
You do it the other way around. God's like, what's this secondhand crap I'm getting right here? What is this vineyard, this wine? If a fire breaks out, verse 6, if a fire breaks out and spreads into the thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain in the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. We're given so many instances of here's how you're going to pay. And then I guess if just like the 10 Commandments were left vague so that they can be interpreted by future civilizations or societies or whatever, maybe these parts that don't give specific restitution prices are done for the same reason. Because
but I would say I don't think the 10 Commandments were necessarily envisioned to be for the future generations or whatever. I think it was left vague so that Moses and the priests that he hires can make interpretations, fair
enough.
You
would say that that's the case here too, then, right?
To try to make it more fair between rich and poor or whatever, even though you're not supposed to do that, situation for situation, you got variances.
Okay.
That's what I would assume.
Okay. And then you would assume then that that's the case here.
Yeah.
Anytime that so verse 7, if anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping and they're stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, donkey, sheep, or garment, or any other lost property about which someone says, "This is mine," both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judges declare guilty must pay back double to the other. So you really just have to go ahead.
I was going to say, is this trial by combat? Like, how is God determining?
Well, again, I think it's the judges that you have to. That's what I mean. If your charisma skill is maxed out, and the person that you offended, if you literally stole from someone and they can't prove that you did it, then you lose it. You know what I mean? If all that person has to do is make the judge think that you're correct. Like, yes, I did steal these things from you, but the judges don't think so.
I mean, I think everything that I'm seeing says that God's the one making the determination, not the judges.
Oh, really? I thought that was the whole point. It's the judges. Everything. See right here, it's literally saying judges in the NASB and in the NIV.
Where are we? We're 21. 9?
Verse 9.
No, 22 verse 9.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the JPS says come before God. The NASB or NRSV has the newest one says God. The ESV says God. The Catholic version says God.
Huh.
The one whom God convicts must make twofold restitution to the other.
Well, see, I thought that was the whole point. Is so like when you're going before the judges, you're going to the tabernacle where the judges sit, and you're saying, my interpretation was that they speak for God as judgment for them, like for the issue at hand. That's what I thought they were getting at, and like why would they say judges if not to intone that very thing? Let me see.
So where are you seeing judges? What version are you reading from?
The NIV in all cases.
NIV?
So 22:9, and in the NASB 1995. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not looking at those specifically right now, and I've kind of moved away from using the NIV because I got this JPS version. I like it a little bit better. Let me see if we've got a note here.
22:9 in the NASV or in the NIV. There's no note for that. But okay, here we go. The note for 22:11. The judges were God's representatives in court cases. See 21:6, 22
Right.
through 9, and 28. Yeah, so that's where I'm pretty sure that's where I picked that up.
Yeah, everything else I'm seeing says they're coming before God. Now, I guess you could say that would be the judges. I don't know. Well, that's the problem with translations.
That's the one and only problem with translations.
The one and only problem.
Yeah, and anyway, so that's what I'm saying, and that's why I feel like you have to like convince the judges. Otherwise, God would know. God is all seeing, all knowing. He knows that you did what you did. So I mean, you have to go to God and be like, "Hey, did you see what he did?" And God's like, "Yes, I did." God doesn't have time for all of this. He's got people for that.
Yeah.
So, okay, verse 10, 22:10. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, or sheep or any other animal to their neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies or is injured or is taken away while no one's looking, the issue between them is to be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. What? You're literally saying, all I have to do is swear to you before God that I didn't do what you're telling me I did, and okay, he did it. That's how deep the fear of God is that if you're going to take my name and say that you didn't do it, well, by Lord, I got to take it. Like, there's so many loopholes for people to be dishonest and distrusting or just untrustworthy here.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I might be passing some of your notes here.
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. If the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be paid to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. Which is fair. That's finally fair. But again, who's to say that it was a wild animal? You can tear up an animal to make it look like it was done by a wild animal and be like, you see, all we have are these shreds.
And just let your dog go after the carcass,
Yeah, exactly. Eat the offal and save the good stuff for me. If anyone borrows an animal from a neighbor and it's injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal and the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss.
Right.
So obvious loophole there.
If you borrow my ox so that you can plow a field, and I am standing there watching you and I see you messing up, I'm like, no. But you do it anyway and the thing dies, it's on me.
Yeah, seriously. It's almost like, all right, here's my ox. Okay, I'm out of here. I appreciate you. Like it's on you now. Or what this is essentially saying again, okay, so we're assuming that humans are fallible and that we are capable of being deceptive, right? Verse 15 is essentially telling us that you can hire an animal, you can pay for it, you can rent it, and then keep it. Because if it was the money that you paid to hire it covers what happens to the animal, whatever happens to the animal.
I would assume that the animal can't live, and that'd be the case. But, if you take it and slaughter it and, your friend lets you rent it cheap, then he's screwed.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what it's getting. And I think is like, I wouldn't just lend you an animal and peace out. I would lend it to you if I'm going to go, if I've got stuff to do, if I have to go pick up groceries from Kroger, I would lend you the animal for a collateral, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And if I come back and the animal is shreds, you say, then whatever money you gave me, That's just good. That's all I get.
Yeah.
Should have been here, dude. Sorry. Should have been watching.
Yeah.
Okay. Social responsibility. Chapter 22, verse 16. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Isn't that what Shechem tried to do with Dinah?
Yeah, pretty much. There was the definite idea that it was not a seduction. It was definitely a
Coercive,
a forcible, yes, a coercive act. Yeah. And this is more of a seduction, I think. Granted, I'm not a scholar. Say it 100,000 times. I'm just dumb. I don't know the original intent, but the way it reads is that.
Okay. And he tried. So, but again, here it doesn't say, like you said, it doesn't say it doesn't make the delineation between forcible sex or just having a glass of wine and if one thing leads to another. It just says if you sleep together. Oh
well, so the versions that I'm seeing says that seduces a virgin. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Okay, this is the one that confounds me. Do not allow a sorceress to live. Where does that come from? What does that mean? What is a sorceress? Do you know what a sorceress is?
Oh, it's a witch, someone who's practicing magic. You talked about the idea of doing these magic things that should be God's domain, but the males that do it is fine.
Yes, a sorceress, not a sorcerer. You're a witch, Harry. All right, get the hell out of here before I kill you. Yeah. Okay, so is that all of it? No, not yet. Okay, I have something to get to here in a minute. Okay. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal is to be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. So we're kind of getting like a mishmash hodgepodge of all these, more specific things that have already been kind of enumerated in the Ten Commandments, relisted under these different headings: social responsibility, right. Purity, things like that.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to talk about the terms we're using between killed, put to death, stoned to death, all that stuff, and destroyed. That's all.
I was going to mention something about that too, but I just think it's funny that you can't have sex with an animal. You're going to be put to death for that. But you can have coercive sexual intercourse with people that you own. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's somehow pure. That's fine. And so when I was looking up what destruction meant in the NIV, it gave some notes to previous or to other scripture, and it talks about when God uses the term destroyed regarding the Canaanites, like their lines would be destroyed. They talk about what is his intention is for all these Israelites to do to the Canaanites, and it literally means to wipe them from the face of the earth.
Okay, not only that, but I've heard from other sources. I think Dan McClellan talked about it. I could be wrong about the source that I'm getting it from, but the specific phrase that the NRSVE and a couple others use is they're devoted to destruction, and that seems to be a ritual sacrifice kind of thing. When you talk about the Canaanites and they're devoted to the root word, I can't remember what it is, but the root word that they're using for that means that this is a holy thing. You may be killing everybody, you're doing it for God because that's what God demands. And this is the same thing here. This is not just an execution. This is a sacrifice. They're sacrificing to another God, so they're going to be sacrificed to the real God.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I dig it.
I mean, not cool, but cool.
Well, obviously. But I mean, look, if I'm someone who believes in this God, then yeah, man, like lay it down. You know what I mean? Put it on the table. But yeah, but to further that explanation of the word destroyed here, it's to say that like if you have children, they'll be killed. Like you're getting rid of that line.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this dude is serious. Do not make sacrifices to any other lord. I mean, what if you're saying like, put the thing on the altar and you're like, this is for Waye. Oh no! Like Yahweh's like that. You get one mispronunciation of my name. After that, destroyed. Okay. So anyway, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you are foreigners in Egypt. Do not take. We were foreigners, but we're also kind of slaves.
You can oppress your slaves, but not the foreigners, because you were a slave.
Yeah. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. Why wouldn't you know it if they weren't crying out? They have to cry out to you.
Yeah.
They can be oppressed, but if they don't intone your name, then you're like, I didn't hear anyone say God.
Well, but also you're not supposed to say the name. So
yeah,
what's he hearing?
Dear Heavenly Father, my anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. So again, there's the eye for the eye. Taking advantage of the widowed or the bastardized will leave your children in the same position, right?
So this obviously has to be God doing the killing. You know what I mean? It's not sword. It was a I will kill for one thing, but also it's not prescribing. Like, it's not saying bring it before the judges or whatever. This is like straight up. If you do this, I'm gonna get you. But it says I'm gonna do it with a sword, so that's weird. Like this.
Yeah.
Is he using other people as the sword? Are they gonna come and kill you, or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
How metaphorical is that supposed to be?
I'm seeing what Rashi has to say about that right now. It's another curse. Let's see. So God is binding the women in widowhood, and their children, they will be forbidden to remarry, and their children will not be allowed to procure the father's property. So it's basically, I'm going to kill your husband, and your children and your survivors will be left destitute. So pretty strong stuff. And that's just if you, what was it for? That was if you
for mistreating
take
them?
Advantage of them.
Yeah.
Was it? What did your translation say?
Abuse them.
Abuse or oppress. I see. Huh.
Yeah.
That's pretty harsh, man.
The ESV. Hang on. The ESV just says mistreat.
Yeah. Okay. So this is such a strange thing to come right after this. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because the cloak is the only thing that they have to cover themselves at night. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. I don't really have anything to say about that necessarily.
Well, other than so you mistreat the orphan, God's going to hear and God's going to hose you, right? But in this case, God's going to hear it,
and that's it. And then he's going to be compassionate about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you going to do, God? And God's like, oh, you don't want to know what happens if I see you with someone else's cloak after sunset. Well, what is it? Like he just continues on. Okay. Don't blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. Interesting that he would put them, those would be put right next to each other. Also, it doesn't say Lord. I just realized that it doesn't say Lord there. What do we think about that? Do not revile the judge. Do not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. I think God is meant to stand in as the judges.
Could be. The footnote in the Catholic version says turning away from God's authority and so failing to honor him.
Yeah. Okay. So we're not talking about we're talking about the caricature of God, not the character. Don't hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. So we've actually seen that. But prior to the 10 Commandments, there was a rule that said, you have to consecrate, you have to give to me as an offering the firstborn of that was during the Passover. But this is the first time it says that to give them on the 8th day. Did you have something to say?
Well, the bit with the Passover stuff talked about you could redeem them, and we talked with the rabbi about it. Give your son to the temple to be a priest, or to serve the temple or whatever, or you can pay money or whatever. But definitely in this case, I know it was Dan McClellan because I just watched the video last night. He talked about this being different, like this. You're supposed to. It's the wording is specific that it's supposed to be a sacrifice. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm going to go with his interpretation over mine, because he's an expert and I'm not. Right. But that it is different.
And finally, you are to be my holy people. So do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to the dogs. So there we get a reason that kind of closes the loophole on, renting and killing or stealing and killing someone else's animals that were torn apart by wild beasts. That's no longer a valid excuse for why you should keep and eat something.
Unless you're being deceptive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So with 22 being drawn to a close there, I wanted to go back over the things that the miswrote that require the offender to die. And you can, if I miss any, you can tell me, or if you have further explication on them, you can go over it. Number one is deliberate killing. If you kill someone and you meant to murder, then you are to be put to death. If you attack your mom and dad, again, we're using the word attack. So it later says that's the second reason, but the fourth reason is that if you curse your mom and dad. So again, like you said earlier, go to hell, mom, go to hell, dad. Like, all right, get me a switch, and if you're a kidnapper, if you kidnap anyone, even if you still have the person with you whenever we find you, you're going to die. Killing a pregnant woman and or their child, owning a bull that has gored more than once, if the second time it's gored results in a death, unless payment is demanded instead, or if the dead person is a slave. Killing a thief after sunrise, can't do that. You'll die for that.
Oh yeah.
Having sex with an animal, you get killed for that. Being a sorceress will get you killed. Sacrificing to any god but Yahweh. And finally, taking advantage of widows or childless or fatherless children. So, did I miss anything so far?
Does it mention anything about the sacrificial aspect of being killed for sacrificing to other gods, or is that just for my thing? Does it not have anything distinction at all?
Well, that was just me reading the list that I made as I read.
Oh, I thought you were talking about like Rashi or somebody made the list. Okay.
Oh no, that was the list. I made that list as I was reading. Like, okay, let's see what really matters. These are things that you can lose your life about.
I considered making a list of laws that were already covered, and you just get a repeat of it. But
before we get to 23, did Dan McClellan in that last video you were mentioning? Did he mention how it's on the eighth day that you are allowed to? Oh crap! I don't think I said that last verse of chapter 20.
I think he did.
Okay, yeah. Give God the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and sheep. Stay with their mother for 7 days, but give them to me on the eighth day. That the eighth day is also when you're supposed to withhold circumcise. Yeah, you're supposed to do that. I was about to call it the Abrahamic covenant. So, did he mention that at all? Like how 7 is a biblical number, but also 8 kind of is too?
No, he didn't mention that.
Yeah,
at least not in my memory.
That's interesting to me though. That like it's they have to stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to God on the 8th. So God has this. There's a consistent theme of work/toil for 6 days, rest on the 7th. Work your fields for 6 years, rest them on the 7th. But when it comes to the consecration, it's more like, feed them or pour over them for 7 days, and on the 8th make your decision. On the 8th, give them to God. Things like that.
So I'm wondering if maybe it has something to do with the purity laws. You got to make sure that the animal is not sickly or diseased. It's got to be without blemish and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if maybe those make a difference, and that's why you're waiting that period. I don't know.
So if God requires a blood sacrifice in all of his covenants, with God, with Noah, it was all of humanity. With Abraham, it was just your foreskin. In both cases, not in the case of Noah, but it's 7 days of consecration or of making sure that they're without blemish. Now, it's on the 8th day that you offer your sacrifice, similar to cutting off your foreskin or burning firstborn. To me, I mean, I'm just
okay. So
to me, it seems pretty obvious, but
what if you're doing it 7 days to honor the creation, but you can't do anything on the Sabbath, so you got to wait for the 8th day?
You got to wait till the 8th day. Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. I dig it. Yeah, it's like so anytime you hear the word 7, supposedly you're supposed to figure that's the number of completeness, right? The seven completes
fullness
the
of God.
circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that could very well be it. It's like you had a week, you're the 6 days of Acts, the 1 day of rest, and now here we are on the second set of 7. Go ahead and chop off your foreskin or whatever. You kill your firstborn sheep. Okay, interesting. Chapter 23, the laws of justice and mercy. Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd, and do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. That's it.
It was kind of a retelling of one of the 10 Commandments, but it seems like you could just simplify it by saying just be honest in all situations. Don't lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
there are tons of ways that you can abbreviate so many of these things, especially given that we've already gone over this. Do not spread false reports. What's another way you can say that? Like don't. What do they call it in the 10 Commandments?
Don't bear false witness.
Yeah, don't bear false witness. So yeah, same thing. Okay. Verse 4, if you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure you help them with it. This is very Jesus-esque, I think. I wasn't expecting to find this kind of like love your neighbor type of thing, turn the other cheek type of message in the Old Testament, to be honest. When I saw this, I was like, that's interesting that God would want me to go out of my way. If I'm busy, I'm doing something, and an enemy's ox or donkey is wandering off, I'm like, are you kidding me? I've got to stop what I'm doing and help my enemy get their crap back.
I think enemy in this context is kind of the neighbor thing as well. I think it meant among God's people and not necessarily anybody else. If you're traveling to Egypt to trade, or whatever, and you're obviously like the Amorites are hella bad. If you see one of them, I don't think that necessarily applies. I would say it should, but I don't think that in this context, that's what it's meant. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Don't deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with a false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death, for I will not acquit the guilty.
So
go ahead.
If this is God saying that he's not going to acquit the guilty, I mean, first off, good. This is great. Don't do this. But if God's not going to acquit the guilty, then what does it matter if you give false witness? You know what I mean? It's bad on you, but it's not going to have anything to do with them.
And we had those previous laws that said that all you have to do is you have to appeal to the judges. And I mean, this is essentially saying that God knows the nature of the dispute. So that you shouldn't worry about it. Like if you're honest, nothing bad will come of you. Yeah. So, but it's also setting you up to say that like, I doubt it works in that line. It works in that direction. It's probably the other way where it's like, well, God convicted you, therefore you must have been guilty. Kind of like that witch hunting with the sword. Sorceress.
Yeah.
You must have been a sorceress. God put you to death. It's like, I don't.
Yeah, that's what I said. Trial by combat earlier. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're alive, so you must have been in the right.
The honest person. Yeah. Yeah. The survival of the fittest, or the not necessarily the most honest. Do not deny justice to the poor people in your lawsuits. I think I've already done that. Yeah. Do not accept a bribe. This is verse 8. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent.
Now, see, this one's great. I think that is such a very good description of, why you shouldn't be taking bribes. But nobody ever talks about that. You know what I mean? In all of these talking about morality of the Bible and stuff, nobody ever mentions that. I think it's so good.
Not only that, I like the poetry of it. It blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent. Yeah,
it's so good. Yeah. And even the other variations, NRSV UE is you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds officials and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. It's just good.
Agreed. And then finally, do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners because you were foreigners in Egypt.
Yeah,
That's literally what chapter 22, verse 21 said.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah. You can't oppress them, but you can enslave them.
Yeah. So strange. So strange. I mean, you can enslave Hebrews by calling it servitude. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so verses 1 through 9 of chapter 23 are essentially just kind of reiterating the different ways you can interpret the don't bear false witness commandment.
Right.
So verse 10, the Sabbath laws. So again, we're getting more delineation of these commandments. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops, but during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what is left. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove.
Okay? Yeah, and this is more like we talked about the Christians not doing the Sabbath because they have Sunday and stuff, but like this is more hardcore. Like not only are you supposed to rest on the Sabbath, you're supposed to let the land rest. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is just like, it should be really important to Christians, and it's not. Like the whole Sabbath thing just kind of goes out the window. It's context, but it's not important anymore. And
yeah, that's a fair criticism.
It's almost like it should be the first commandment. You know what I mean? Right behind God being your God. It just seems so important.
Yeah. I think this is still the final. This is the final godly commandment, right? This is the 5th commandment. On the Sabbath, whenever they're baking manna and stuff, whenever they're collecting manna, how do they go about getting food on the 7th day?
You're supposed to collect it on the 6th day and hold it over.
So if your fields are fallow for the 7th year, what are you supposed to do the 6th year?
Well, I think you can rotate. I don't think
so. Okay.
So it's not on the Sabbath because the Sabbath is a day. This is just a extrapolation of it. So you can rotate it out so that you've got food and the poor and, the land can rest and everything else can have its time.
Okay, that's fair, but it doesn't say that. And I had the same thought, but it does say, let your fields lie fallow.
That's true.
So, I mean,
maybe you're supposed to collect it up and save it. I don't know.
But obviously not, right? But at the same time, let's say that you are, rotating your crops or rotating your fields. How are you not like in the back of your mind going like, I hope this is okay because it said to let my fields lie fallow. And here I am, Yeah. Anyway, I can see being worried that I was doing something wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But that's what God wants. God wants you to be afraid. So anyway. All right. For 6 days, do your work. But on the 7th day, do not work, so that your ox and donkey may rest, and also so that the slave born in your household, admitting here that there is no justice for that slave. They're born to your household. There's no letting them go. The only way that slave can even have its father after the father has served 6 years is if the father pledges to be a slave for the rest of his life. Okay. So that your ox and donkey may rest, so that the slave born in your household and the foreigner living among you may be refreshed. Be careful to do everything I've said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods, and do not let them be heard on your lips. Yeah, so we're kind of reiterating not only the 5th commandment, but also the 1st commandment. Is everything okay? I saw is everything okay with the delivery and stuff?
Oh, no, I just pulling up my camera so I can see when it comes. It should be fine.
Okay.
I'm just making sure.
Okay, then there are rules to have 3 annual festivals.
So hang on, just one last thing. Verse 12. I'll read it again just to be sure. Specifically, that your homeborn slave and the resident alien may be refreshed. So now it says you're not supposed to oppress the resident alien because you were oppressed in Egypt. Why do they need rest as well if you're not oppressing them? You know what I mean? Can't they do their own thing if they're not part of your people?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's a very interesting point. Yeah, they're like, all right, you need to rest. I'm like, I don't want to rest. I'm like, well, you got to rest. My God says that you have to rest. guess I have to do what you tell me to. I'm your freaking slave.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So the 3 annual festivals. 3 times a year, you're to celebrate a festival for me. The festival of unleavened bread, the thing we've already talked about, the Passover. For 7 days, eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv, for in that month you came out of Egypt. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. How does that translate? In the NASB, none shall appear before me empty-handed. What does that mean? Don't come to me without offering something?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so yeah.
Now, that's just talking about the Passover, feast or whatever. It's 7 days. No, I don't think that you're supposed to offer anything to God at that for that. I could be wrong, but just based on what we've read before and what we have here, it might mean that everybody gets to share, and you can't exclude anybody. If somebody doesn't have food, to celebrate this, you make sure that they have it. But maybe there is, something that says that you're supposed to sacrifice for that festival as well. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I had in mind that it might be somewhat transactional. Like we are remembering the Passover, so remember me by offering a sacrifice to me. But it doesn't say sacrifice; it just says no one is to appear before me empty-handed. Which Okay. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in your field. Celebrate the festival of ingathering at the end of the year when you gather your crops. When you gather in your crops from the field. So that makes sense. 3 times a year, all the men are to appear before the sovereign Lord. Do not offer the blood. Sorry. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me, along with anything containing yeast. What would? What are we talking about there? What is a sacrifice that would have blood and yeast?
I don't know. I mean, maybe so. You're not supposed to have blood, obviously, and that there's ritual things talking about how it's supposed to be blood and all this other stuff. That kind of makes sense. The leaven makes sense in the, context of the Passover or whatever. But I'm wondering if maybe do they consider yeast making alcohol to be a leavening? So maybe you're supposed to do the grapes before they're made into wine, or you're supposed to do a substitution for the wine. I don't know.
Wow. I hadn't even considered that. I just thought it started to appear to me that God just hates yeast. It makes sense to not have leavening in your bread whenever you're trying to escape from the Israelites super quick, or escape from the Egyptians really quick.
A case can be made, but it's not a good case.
Oh, yeah. But here he is saying, don't bring me any yeast whatsoever. This is it. At no point does God allow yeast. There are two verses or two pieces of scripture where he's like, no yeast, Yeah. Yeah. So I also wanted to mention earlier, so the festival of the harvest, that is supposedly the same as the festival of the Pentecost in Christian beliefs, right? Have you heard of the festival of the Pentecost?
I'm marginally familiar with Pentecost. It was granted, I was only like seriously in church and stuff for a couple of years, so I don't have all of the cultural, background information that most Christians would be familiar with. I know we talked about Pentecost as it is in the Bible in terms of, speaking in tongues, stuff like that. But I was raised Baptist, and then when I got married, I went to a Methodist church, and a lot of those people really didn't seem to dig on any of the Pentecostal style. I can't remember what it's called. It's not experiential. I don't remember what it was called, but it's, like speaking in tongues and all that other stuff doesn't really happen in that church. So I'm not super familiar with it. It was just kind of avoided a little bit.
Well, I wanted to bring a modern context to it. I meant to do that earlier, but you're supposed to celebrate with a feast whenever you in the Bible in Jewish religion, you're supposed to celebrate with a feast. That's supposed to commemorate the first fruits of the crops you sow. Your first sowing,
Mm-hmm.
your first harvesting. But in the festival of the Pentecost, it takes place. The
Give me-
reason why it's called Pentecost is so Pentecost literally means 50 days, and nowadays, so it's supposed to take place 50 days after Passover. That's when the festival. That's when the festival of the harvest is. Well,
Yeah, I remember there
the festival of
definitely being.
Pentecost.
Well, I was just gonna say, I do remember there being a specific like day in the year that was mentioned. Like I said, I don't know much about it, but I remember that much.
Well, so being that Easter is the Christian analog for the Passover, the festival of Pentecost, or the Pentecost, is the analog for the festival of harvest.
Mhm.
And it takes place 50 days later, or 49 days if you count the first night being the first day. So that's 7 days of 7, right? Seven weeks and 7 days. Anyway, it's kind of interesting how that's still a thing, and it's mostly in Eastern Orthodox religions. I need to ask my Catholic buddies if they celebrate the festival of the Pentecost. But it's called the movable feast because Easter takes place on different days. So it's basically a big feast that takes place 50 days after Easter. Pretty neat. I thought it was cool how it's still like a living thing that happens. Okay, we're getting to that cool part with the mother's milk. The fat of my festival offerings must not be kept until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God, and do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. And where you sent me a text about that. Do you remember what you were thinking whenever you did that?
So the note, let me see.
The note on 23:19 says.
Yeah. Well, I was just trying to find where I read it. But basically the note said that it said that boiling a kid in its mother's milk was using something that gives life in order to take life. And I'm just sitting here going, okay, if you want to make that point, I guess that's relatively fair, but unless you're like boiling the kid alive, it's already dead. It doesn't mesh. And I don't understand how this translates into like not eating a cheeseburger. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, you take this to mean this is the precursor to the kosher rules that say not to mix.
Right.
Okay.
Huh. At least I think that's the case.
Okay.
And I'm not saying
honestly,
I'm not saying that cheeseburger is fine because it's not boiled, but it's not prepared together. So eating it together, I don't know. I'm not Jewish, so I don't know. But I just think weird that specifically that note was like completely nonsensical to me. You're not killing a kid with milk, Yeah.
Yeah, especially given if you were like, a kid is large. That's a lot of milk. That's several days or several goats worth of milk.
Yeah.
So you're really having to go through a lot just to kill that dude if that's the means by which you mean to kill them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it probably means more like, having enough to fill a pot and then cooking the bits. But yeah, you're right. You're not killing it with that.
But still, I don't understand the prohibition anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, neither do I. Probably because cooking meat and milk is disgusting. It's gross. What's wrong with this meat? It tastes like milk. Okay. So this is an interesting thing because it's not so much rule. This is what to do. The following is what to do whenever you are done with your stay at Sinai and when God is leading you out. God is leading the way, right? So, verse 20. See, I am sending an angel ahead of you so that to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place I've prepared. Pay attention to him. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion since my name is in him. If you listen carefully to what he says, go ahead.
Well, some of the other translations say transgression. He will not pardon your transgression, which is also an analog for sin. So it seems to me that God can designate people to forgive sin. You know what I mean? If this is the case, that he won't pardon your sin because my name is in him, means that he has the authority to do it. He just won't because I said not to. So if that's the case, then why does Jesus need to die in order to forgive your sin? You know what I mean? Can't God just do it for one thing? But in this case, specifically, he can designate other people to do it.
Right. Yes. God. So, I mean, that sounds pretty game breaking right there.
Yeah.
To put it that way, but also historically, so far, God has shown a willingness to forgive what he is now establishing as transgressions or as sins, bearing false witness, amongst others. Like I'm thinking of several cases throughout Genesis where people just straight up lie to get the better of someone else, and that's because, and God forgives because he's their chosen people. He's part of the patriarchal lineage, right? So God already has established that. I love you. So yeah, that is game breaking. We're setting, you're right. We're establishing a course where God is allowing for forgiveness to take place, and we don't even have his strange child sacrifice later where Jesus has to die, right? Huh. That's very intuitive, man. Good job. I didn't even see that happening there. All right. Let's see. 22. If you listen carefully to what he says and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and will oppose those who oppose you. My angel will go ahead of you and bring you to the land of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I will wipe them out. Do not bow down before their gods or worship them to follow their practices. You must demolish them. Yeah. You must demolish them and break their sacred stones to pieces. Okay. Yeah. Worship the Lord your God, and his blessing will be on your food and water. I will take away sickness from among you, and none will miscarry or be barren in your land. I will give you a full lifespan.
So as long as you keep the commandments, you're not going to die until you're very, very old. No one's going to miscarry. Everyone's going to be able to have kids.
Yeah.
And you're not even going to get sick.
That's a big promise. That's a huge promise. And the ask isn't crazy because do not bow down. God said, I will wipe them out. It's like, they're like, this sounds like a pretty good deal. All we have to do is follow this angel and not transgress. And when we get there, you're going to kill everyone and we're going to live for 120 years. Like
that's a huge bait and switch.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll soon see how that actually transpires. Yeah. I like how God wants you to destroy their gods, their stone, their sacred stones. God's like, I don't even want to see their sacred stones when we get there, lest you look upon them favorably and be like, oh, that's a pretty handsome God that you used to have here. God's like, what did you say? I'll be darned if you're going to worship that stone.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is interesting. 27. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all of your enemies turn their backs and run. I will send the hornet ahead of you and drive the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites out of your way. Did you have a note on that?
Is that what happens? They just show up and everybody's like, oh, no.
And this God already looks so much like the gods that already exist there. You know what I mean? They know El. Right? Yeah. They know El. They know Baal. These are gods that Yahweh, as this amalgamation God or this amalgam God, already looks very much like the gods that they already pledged their allegiance to.
Yeah. Well, from what I understand, there was this pantheon of gods. You had El at the top, and then you had the sons of God, which were Baal and Yahweh and all these others, and then the Yahweh kind of incorporates into El and they become this father God, and all the other gods are now, nothing or whatever. But it's very clear that, he was just another one of these gods. We're coming up. There's going to be like show-offs, not show-offs. What am I trying to say? Like an ancient Canaanite rap battle where they try to get their gods to, perform to prove themselves. And so,
well, all right. So he's going to confuse them with his terror, and they're going to get it out of the way. But he's not going to drive the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites out in a single year because the land would become too desolate and the wild animals would become too numerous for these 2.5 million Israelites.
Yeah, I was about to say.
little by little, I will drive them out before you until you have increased enough to take possession of the land. How many do you need? I'm like, you're quite numerous. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert of the Euphrates, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we'll talk about that. This is the promised land. This is the land that the Israelites are supposed to take and inhabit, albeit piece by piece, slowly. But it's supposed to go from the Mediterranean all the way to the Euphrates, and from the Red Sea, whatever, up to into the wilderness, wherever they were. Like, that's what I said before. It's not a very good description of this place, but that's essentially what it is. It's supposed to be essentially from Sinai up to, I guess, where Israel stops now, but from the Mediterranean all the way to the Euphrates.
Yeah, that's a massive chunk of land there.
Yeah.
Before we get too far away, I wanted to mention. So there's actually a chiasm here that I passed up. It's verses 20 through 23.
I forgot.
So, yeah, verses 20 through 22. Verse 20. I'm sending an angel to go ahead of you. Verse 23. My angel will go ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Verse 21. Listen to him and do what he says. Verse 22. If you listen carefully to what he says and do what I say. And the middle part of the middle chunk of the chiasm is, since my name is in him. So they wanted to draw your attention back to the part that God is present in that angel.
Right.
Okay. So that's all. Where are we? I will.
32.
Oh, yeah. 32. Do not make a covenant with these people or their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you.
Yeah, so he's told us several times already not to worship these other gods. And now he's letting us know that if you inhabit a land where these other gods are not smashed and destroyed, you're going to end up worshiping them. Like, I haven't proven myself yet, through all this stuff that's happened, all you've been through and everything, it's not enough. You're gonna
if you're okay. So if everything you say is the truth and would occur as you say it would occur, then all of these, we are going to be delivered. We are your chosen people. We are all of these things, and yet we will succumb to the promise of other gods if you say it's so. So It sounds like if you just say that it isn't so, then that would be the case. We can skip all of this stuff. Just say it isn't so. You know what I mean? Is that not the way it works? Or are you, God, beholden to our whims as Israelites, as your chosen people? Right. Oh, we're going to do whatever we want to do, regardless of what God says. If that's not the case, then just say the opposite and we'll do what you say.
Yeah.
Like they're wanting it two ways here. I don't know. Okay. Well, that's all we got for chapter 23. Let's see. You hit on those last bits of your notes here. You got all that. Yeah. That's good. All right. So you were saying that 24 is the people's covenant with God, and I think that would be a good place to start its own section. So
I believe so.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, you have stuff to do. I got to eat. So I guess in that case, we'll call it good there. We'll meet up soon for the next little bit. And until next time, my name is Jeff.
I'm Chris.
And this has been Eating the Apple.
Hungry? Have a Guinness.